Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is 10:01 on the 12th of October. Welcome. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting for the Washoe County Board of Commissioners. And with that, I would ask Mr. Hesse, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, sir? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right. Madam Clerk, can I get a roll call?
Of course. Bob Lucy, Chair.
Here.
Vaughn Hartung, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alexis Hill over Zoom.
Here.
Kitty Jung over phone.
Present.
And Jeannie Herman is absent. County Manager Eric Brown. Here. Assistant District Attorney Nathan Edwards.
Here.
And I'm Jan Gallassini, your County Clerk. Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I appreciate that. All right. And with that, Mr. Manager, that takes us to item 3.
There you go. Item 3 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the commission agenda. The commission will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments are to be made to the commission as a whole.
All right. Madam Clerk, will you please call public comment?
Of course. First up, we have Larry Chesney, followed by John Hesse.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Larry Chesney. I'm from Palomino Valley. My comments this morning are relating to the agenda item 12, relating to the authority to delegate litigation decisions to the chair and the county manager. This proposal would eliminate the process of representative government, would put the decision-making power for the county, any county litigation, with a politician and a county employee that reports to that same politician. I feel that the decision powers should remain with the entirety of the Board of County Commission so that all districts have a say in how the taxpayers' money is spent and keeping the accountability with each commissioner. I request that you reject this proposal. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
John Hesse, followed by Darlene Hesse.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Is this on? Hello? Hello?
Yep.
Okay. What is on? Okay. I'm John Hesse, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you. It's actually, I'm wanting to speak about the Wild Creek Golf Course and the first tee, which is item number 15, but I want to do a public comment. First off, thank you, commissioners and people that are helping out the commissioners with their work. But thank you very much for the work that we've done on Wild Creek Golf Course, even though the high school did go in, and I'm still not sure that was the right place for the new high school in the back 9, but it is there now. And we do need more schooling for our kids. I certainly agree that. I guess my concern on that item number 15 is the language that if for some reason First Tee is not able or doesn't want to continue golfing there, that it does go back to you folks. That's what we've seen in the agenda. And we're just hoping that if it does go back, that it goes back so that it'll always stay as a recreation or park, but that we don't have any high-density housing or commercial structures. So that was my comment, and I'm speaking for several people in the Malapai area, which is on the east side of the golf course. Anyway, you got a big job, and I won't take any more of your time, but I thank you very much for your help and anything you can do to keep this an open area and not go into public housing and things of that nature if it doesn't work out with First Tee. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hesse.
Darlene Hesse, followed by Patrick File.
Yes, good morning to everyone. And this is a nice day for us. I feel as though the Wild Creek Golf Course, everything is kind of falling in place, and I do still have my concerns of the well-being of it. And I pray to God that this property will always be safe for the public. And I'm here to represent the Wild Creek group that couldn't make it today. But anyway, I just wish you well. I wish the first tee well. I'll be so happy to see the improvements on the golf course and see all the dead trees be removed and have it look like a well-cared golf course again. And it's been a lovely place to live. And I played on that land as a child and broke bottles, wasn't supposed to, told by my mother, but I picked up every single one of them, and I have such great pride and feeling of the hope that everything will fall in place and that this property will be protected in the future by people like you and Washoe County, the Sparks City Council. We talked to Ed Lawson yesterday, and it sounds like everything is going to be taken care of in the deed, and we sure are waiting to see that deed. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you, Ms. Hesse.
Patrick File, followed by Janet Butcher.
Welcome, sir.
Good morning. My name is Patrick File. I'm president of the Nevada Open Government Coalition. We're a diverse and nonpartisan coalition supporting accountability through government transparency. You should have a letter in opposition to resolution R21-063, which is agenda item number 11 today, which proposes to charge fees for personnel time for certain public records requests. Other commenters in our letter can get into the particulars of the strong legal argument against this proposal. Suffice to say, the Nevada Public Records Act does not allow entities to charge for personnel time, full stop. And for good reason. The intent of the law is to ensure the government meets its obligation to provide access to records. Providing that access is assumed to be part of doing business. Government can't essentially charge individual requesters a second time for those records, nor can it use fees to penalize certain requesters to push back against requests that officials consider onerous or excessive. Also, as a matter of public policy, if we can agree that functional and accountable government relies on transparency, surely we can agree that public officials shouldn't respond to an increased interest in public records requests by raising barriers to public records, by raising or in the form of new fees. Fees can be justified in some circumstances, and the NPRA is clear about that. But we ask or we ask you to remember that fees are always a barrier to access and a disproportionate burden on people who have lesser financial means. It's also important to remember that other means exist within the framework of the NPRA to deal with large or unwieldy requests. Agencies are empowered to help requesters narrow their requests, to expedite them, and they can also extend the time frame needed to complete those requests. We don't disagree that the proposal highlights some valid concerns. We do probably need some better answers for how to devote more resources to public records at the local level, and you can count on the NOGC to stand with local governments should they call on the legislature for more support, resources, and/or dedicated staffing to make records available to the public quickly and efficiently. I think we would also welcome any opportunity in the meantime to work with any department, division or agency or the records officers towards strategies and resources to improve public records systems for both sides of the transaction. But in addition to all that, I do think our letter highlights fundamental legal flaws in the county's proposal. As a local taxpayer myself, I don't want to see the county or any of its agencies drawn into protracted and expensive litigation over an attempt to make public records harder to obtain. So that's why the NOGC is asking you to reject the proposal in resolution number R21-063, agenda item 11, to charge fees for personnel time for certain public records requests. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Janet Butcher, followed by Lorraine Doherty.
Good morning, Ms. Butcher.
Janet Butcher, great-great-great-great-granddaughter of John Baumberger and Captain Johann Steinmetz, who served under George Washington during the Revolutionary War. During the time of George Washington, the term was inoculated, not vaccinated. It was done by injecting a less deadly form of smallpox because General Washington didn't want to risk debilitating his men and leaving them vulnerable to a British attack. While they recovered, the enemy, knowing it will certainly take advantage of our situation, he wrote at the time, so it appears that he did not mandate all of his troops to be inoculated en masse, as he was a wise leader. So he decided on inoculating only new recruits as soon as they enlisted. This meant they contracted the milder form of the disease at the same time while they were being outfitted for war. And they would be healed by the time they left to join the army, according to the library. Yes, George Washington persuaded his wife to undergo the procedure in 1776. Please note, Martha obviously chose to become inoculated with the live virus. Operative word, chose. It is not reported that he would banish her from society or divorce her if she didn't. Back then, the inoculation process was called variolation, named after the virus that causes smallpox, the variola virus. It involved exposing people to the live virus by scratching material from smallpox sores into their arms or having them inhale it. The current experimental drug being pushed on people and children is not the same as being inoculated with a live virus. Also, please take note that smallpox is a one-animal host virus, while COVID is a multi-host virus. They cannot be compared for eradication. The COVID-19 solution doesn't fit the definition of a vaccine. Calling it that is misleading. Who has stock in these pharmaceutical companies? It is time to end the public health emergency. Not trusting in an experimental injection, a flat earther does not make.
Lorraine Doherty, followed by Nicholas St. John.
Good morning, Lorraine Doherty for the record. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking you for something, and that is the cleaning up of the homeless encampment that was beginning right at the Wells off-ramp coming into this facility. I passed there today, and it's clean. I hope that the commission had something to do with that. I would also like to express my concern about that issue growing more towards the south and into the residential communities. I know there are a lot of shelters available. I would just really like to see these people without homes encouraged to take advantage of those services because it's just so unsafe and unhealthy with open human waste on the sidewalk, and it's getting very cold. It's actually dangerous. So I would like to thank you for that. One thing I am going to ask for your help on also is illegal dumping. There's been quite a bit of it also on the south end of town in that old southwest suburban area where the large fields are, and we're dependent on ditch water to irrigate, and people are coming by and dumping in those ditches. I have called innumerable times asking for assistance. It was during COVID, so there wasn't a lot that could be done, but I understand now those crews are out and active. I've seen them myself, and I've requested through the proper channels to have someone please come out and look at that. But specifically, it's on Lakeside between Frost and, gosh darn, I forgot the name of the street. But anyway, it's right at that corner. So I'd really appreciate any attention that could be given to that. Again, I want to just declare that I believe that it is long past for this public emergency to come to an end. as I've stated before, we're no longer in an emergency because an emergency, excuse me, is sudden, urgent, and temporary. We're pushing 2 years on this, and we're long past temporary. I also believe that all these attempts to mandate vaccines, masks, should be stopped. Merchants are not in the position to be enforcing anything. They're not the police, they don't have that authority, and there is no vaccine mandate at the federal level right now. Nothing in writing, simply a press release. So I appreciate your attention to that, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Doherty.
Nicholas St. John, followed by Cindy Martinez.
Welcome, Mr. St. John.
Good morning. Nicholas St. John, not St. Joy for the record. As we come before this commission, we are demanding a scientific panel be convened to present scientific evidence and facts for maintaining that Washoe County should remain under an unconstitutional state of emergency, with the doctors from the health district and 2 or 3 panelists of the choice of we the people. The death to population ratio in Washoe County is just 0.22%. Under what authority do you maintain that with such a low death toll that Washoe County should remain under a state of emergency, and that you have denied even a discussion of putting a resolution on the agenda to end this state of emergency? We're also demanding that you put on the agenda a resolution prohibiting a vaccine passport. I have with me here an affidavit of maladministration. There is in it a warning. You may be in violation of federal law, and persisting with your behavior may lead to your arrest and or civil damages. Also under that, the law provides that you can be held personally responsible and liable, as well as your company or agency. You are advised to cease and desist with your policies and to seek personal legal counsel if you do not understand this law. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Cindy Martinez, followed by Wesley Griffin. Thank you, sorry about the name.
Welcome, Ms. Martinez.
Good morning, thank you. Good morning to the commission, county staff, Madam Clerk. I support my fellow citizens' statements regarding item 12, as well as our continued requests about response and mitigation efforts about COVID-19. But what I'm here to talk about this morning briefly, I've got a document here, but I'm not going to submit it into the public record. I do not have authorization for secondary dissemination. But this is to kind of build on what I delivered last meeting about the apparent coordination of county, or I'll just say generally speaking, government resources in hiding the arrest of a fellow citizen. And you can go back to the meeting minutes in September and see about that. And I'm not going to go into names and that kind of stuff, but here's what's troubling, is that I'm a person of modest means, and if I had similar criminal activity or violations that are detailed in this report, I can tell you that I would not be afforded the kind of leniency that this person was able to enjoy. This person drove drunk a total of almost 10 miles round trip from Wingfield down into my neighborhood, driving on the wrong side of the road, driving into traffic, flipping a U-turn in front of oncoming traffic, returning back up on Vista Boulevard, where she blew a tire and crashed into a construction sign. And when she was detained, or when she was stopped and questioned by the police, she was so grossly intoxicated that the police officer had to halt the field sobriety tests and take her into custody for those charges that I mentioned before, DUI and failure to maintain a lane. But what's more troubling is, and she did give consent to submit to a blood draw, the results of which, and I want you to pay attention, fellow citizens, because you might want to use this as your defense if you get caught doing this. The blood alcohol of this subject was 0.308. .308. That's almost 4 times the legal limit. Almost 4 times the legal limit. And this fortunate citizen who was arrested for DUI and failed to properly maintain a travel lane was pled down to reckless driving. No DUI, she got fines and fees of $640, the usual sentence to drug and alcohol courses, impact panel, no probation. That person's driving on our streets today. Where are your children and your family?
Wesley Griffin, followed by Aaron Massengale.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. I'm Wesley Griffin here to speak in favor of the action to approve the purchase and sale between Washoe County and Northern Nevada Youth Golf Foundation, known as First Tee. I might say that this is really a great action. It's the result of a lot of effort between citizens of our community and some public officials. I would like to give kudos to Von Hartung, one of our champions in this effort to try to maintain our park space and open space as that. And it took a lot of effort to stop one of our other public entities from trying to come in and use open space and park space for the school. We got lots of places around where they could have purchased property from the federal government for like $10 an acre, but here we've got a public entity trying to come in and take away our precious recreational area and open space when there's plenty of other avenues available to them to have that. So occasionally, you know, you see things that would appear to be just no-brainers that somehow are just not seen by public officials. So, Vaughn, thank you very much. You, in conjunction with Ed Lawson and Diane, our county, our official for our area, and having the backbone to stand up and help us get this through. So, thanks very much. We look forward to this passing. We would like to see the language to include that not only will the space be used for golf, but if it should ever revert back to the county because First Tee is unable to continue, that the language be included in the grant bargain and deed that the property will be held in perpetuity for recreational and open space. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir.
Aaron Massengale, followed by Darla Lee.
Welcome, Ms. Massengale.
Good morning. Last September, I started emailing paperwork to the County Commission regarding ending the public health emergency. And then others started doing something similar. And we still have not gotten a resolution passed to end the public health emergency. Nicholas St. John quoted our county stats this morning, and we obviously don't have one. This morning, San Joaquin County in California is passing a resolution to ban vaccine passports. Also a request that the constituents of this county have been asking from this commission, and we still have not gotten one. I look at the agenda today, and after us asking for resolutions to be passed that are meaningful to the county and to the United States of America, and they have not been passed. We have 2 resolutions on today's agenda. One, to charge people for public records, and 2, to consolidate and abuse power for settlement and litigation. Wow. Today, I'm going to present you guys with copies of resolutions, one which you have, to end the public health emergency from Placer County in California, which was passed last September, in California of all places, and a copy of a resolution to end the public health emergency from a county in Nevada, just in case you don't know what these look like. I also have copies of resolutions to ban vaccine passports, 2 from Nevada counties and 1 from a California county. Additionally, I have copies of resolutions regarding nutritional guidance for basic health that all people should have. And I'm sure that we can't argue with the fact that all people should have access to information regarding basic nutritional health for their immune system. And a resolution regarding treatment for COVID-19, one that doesn't kill people in the ICU. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Darla Lee, followed by Melanie Sutton.
Welcome, Ms. Lee.
Good morning. May I ask, is Jeannie Herman, Alexis, Kitty, are they online or are they just absent? Where are they this morning?
Commissioner Herman is absent.
Okay.
And the other 2 commissioners are via phone this morning.
Okay, just was wondering who's hearing this. So I echo the sentiments of the citizens that have already spoken on Wild Creek, as well as the ending of the emergency. So I won't, duplicate, except that I would like to especially thank John Martini for the record that he, after the meeting at the Spark City Council, he was kind enough to call me and explain in more detail about the wording that at the last meeting I expressed concern for the motion before the board concerning Wild Creek, which is at the end of this agenda. But Mr. Martini did call me and in detail explained why having the wording in the deed, he expressed would be the best way to secure that open space for the citizens, not only in the area of Wild Creek and for affordable golf, but for the wonderful job that First Tee does in teaching, kids, students, the game of golf. The other area I did want to express concern about the vaccine mandates that have been, as mentioned, from a federal level, but I hope that this board understands just how personal this becomes. My daughter, who works from home and has chosen not to get a vaccine for personal reasons, both medical and religious, is now being mandated by the 3rd of December that if she is not fully vaccinated, she will be terminated from her job of 18 years for a national company. So are you aware of this kind of thing that is happening in our midst to our people? It's become not just who's essential and who's not, who lost jobs during this last year of absolute insanity, but it's right now that people are being mandated or they will lose their jobs again. This is unconscionable. This has to stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Melanie Sutton, followed by Patricia Toon.
Good morning. As usual, I'd like to request an end to the public health emergency. As Darla just said, people are losing they're choosing not to keep their jobs. I guess that's their choice, actually not. But this is absolutely unreal. This is the flu, guys. It's 99.97% survival rate that you guys are, or companies, because you want to put it in their hands. People are losing their jobs, their livelihoods, not being able to feed their families because they refuse to get the shot. And it's happening in our community. I'll tell you what right now, sorry. I'll tell you what, if my husband has to get the shot, I'm sure, Lucy, you guys will probably be glad about this, but I will be leaving the state. I love this state. I love our community. We've created so many relationships, but this needs to end. It's ridiculous. People are wearing masks. I can't even believe how many people, when I go into a store, people wearing masks. It's like probably at least 95%. What the? I thought we lived in America. It's crazy. So as always, please end the public health emergency, and that's it.
Patricia Toon, followed by Pam Roberts.
Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Toon.
Patricia Toon for the record. Some of you may not be familiar with William Wilberforce. He was a Christian statesman who today would probably be called a flat earther. Wilberforce was born in 1759 and suffered from poor health. Thank you. He was 5'3" and weighed 76 pounds as an adult during one bout with illness, but none of this dulled his sharp mind. He entered politics, and at his own admittance, it was for his own distinction as my darling object, i.e. it was pride. Then God interrupted his life. It changed the world. He wrestled with how to participate in such a morally corrupt environment as Parliament, where bribery, fixed elections, open drunkenness were commonplace. How could he align this with God's will? Then he met John Newton, a former slave ship owner and the hymn writer of Amazing Grace. Most of us know that song, probably don't know the origins of that. Newton encouraged Wilberforce to stay in Parliament and use that platform to shine a light in the darkness of the slave trade. For the next 20 years, Wilberforce would do just that. It was an uphill battle. He not only had to convince wealthy Parliament members, most of whom were benefiting financially from the institution of slavery, but he had to educate a largely ignorant population who interacted rarely with African slaves. In one famous speech on the floor in the House of Commons, Wilberforce put forward an abolition bill and gave a grave report on the slave trade's abuses. It's a 30-year cough. Never smoked. He concluded, having heard all of this, you may choose to look the other way, but you can never again say you did not know. Parliament ignored, but Wilberforce continued the fight. He received death threats and dual challenges from abolition opponents. He even lost a few friends. He recited Psalm 119 to himself continuously. Finally, after 10 long years, on February 23rd, 1807, a vote was taken. 283 to 16 voted in favor of abolition. Today, Wilberforce is recognized as one of history's great Christian cultural reformers. His contributions to civic morality, shaped by the gospel, radically transformed British society's treatment of the least of these. His activism marked a pivotal point in the direction of the Western culture, such that today slavery is considered unconscionable and in much of the developed world. I'm sure you can see the similarities between the slave trade and those today enslaved by mandates. My heart goes out to Commissioner Herman, a modern version of Wilberforce, in my opinion, for continuing the fight, for putting on the agenda to end the public health emergency. I appreciate your time. I consider myself a flat earther, and now I understand that is a high compliment.
Thank you,
Pam
Ms. Toon.
Roberts, followed by Valerie Fianacca.
My name is Pam Roberts. Good morning, Commissioners. I am here to address the issue of transparency in our county government. And looking at Agenda Item 11, in which you're going to consider charging for the labor costs related to public record requests, I have some concerns about that. I believe it will have a chilling effect on your constituents holding this commission and the county staff accountable for their decisions and actions. I have an example of 2 examples of when either myself or my spouse requested public records. One was dealing with getting the bylaws for the Palomino Valley GID. We were told by the secretary that they didn't have any bylaws. We contacted that the county might have them. When we contacted the county, they said they couldn't find them. They probably are in archives. Now that's going to take a lot of time to find those bylaws for the Palomino Valley GID. And so I'm supposed to pay for that when I'm already paying taxes to the commission or to the county to have the staff work on things like this. Another example, I requested all the cab applications for the Warm Springs Rural Cab for the last, I think it was 7 to 10 years at a point when I was trying to ascertain whether or not certain people were being reappointed who'd already been appointed, so their term limits had expired. I also found that one of the members of the cab was residing with the commissioners, so that person shouldn't have been appointed. Again, when I reached out to get those applications, I was told that they couldn't find them. And obviously, I didn't want to have to pay. I didn't know what the payment was going to be, but I wasn't going to pay for staff to go look for something that I think should have been readily available to your constituents. Regarding agenda item 12, I encourage you to actually delay making any decision upon this. I'm not totally against the concept of expediting, but I understand I have some concerns. Delegating litigation decisions to one person, the chair, who was elected by 51% of his or her district, not the entire county. A very small portion of the county is going to be making decisions about whether or not to settle a case, or delegating it to the county manager, who I personally have a lot of respect for, our current county manager. However, that manager was not elected by the people of this county. I understand that the general fund budget for last fiscal year was $355.5 million. So by having a cap of $150,000, there's some help. But I ask that you delay the vote so that you can develop better protocols to ensure that the chair or the county manager will still be accountable to this commission and its constituents.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts.
Valerie Fianaka.
Welcome, Ms. Fanaka.
Thank you. My name is Valerie Fianaka, for the record. I'm here to speak against the draconian and ongoing COVID measures as well. I'm a small business owner. My business has been in existence for almost 65 years, 3rd generation florist. These need to end. I also want to remind everybody that only 8% of the people supported the revolution. It looks similar today. Only 8% of the people are standing up against these measures, I feel like, or close to that. It's stunning to me how many people are just falling in line with it. They only hurt children and small businesses, which I think is the goal, actually. All we need to do is follow the money. Schools and counties have gotten a huge sum of money. It's staggering how much money they've gotten. I followed it at the schools very closely, but I also have followed it here at the county, and it's huge sums of money. Mr. Hartung, you are noticeably absent from the Public Utilities Commission hearing regarding Great Basin Water Company and its major arsenic and well problems. This is in regards to passing on a nearly $15 million cost to only 587 customers. This is stunning. I hope you didn't have a family emergency, because that is the only reason in my mind that you should not have represented your constituents at that meeting. I can't even understand that at all. I'm going to promise you all today, with the exception of Jeannie Herman, I'm going to knock on doors to get all of you unelected. I think you're doing a terrible job for this community. And I'm going to actively participate in getting you all unelected.
Thank you.
Next up, we have an email from Elise Weatherly that I will place on the record.
All right.
And then we have no more public commenters.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, we will close public comment, bring it back to the board. We are on to item 4. Mr. Manager.
Item 4 is commissioners, county managers' announcements, reports, and updates to include boards and commissions updates, requests for information, or topics for future agendas.
All right. Mr. Manager, do you have anything that you would like to start off with this morning?
I do, Mr. Chair. I have a few items. Number one, I'd like to acknowledge that our very own treasurer, Tammy Davis, a week ago was a recipient of the Nevada Association of Counties, or NACO Award for Participatory Leadership. And I had the pleasure of giving her the award at the annual NACO conference, and I just would like to congratulate her for that honor, representing the county. Secondly, that I'd like to remind the public that our redistricting website is still up, and as are our displays in our libraries and here in our building on 9th Street. We will be extending the timeframe for public comment through through Tuesday, October 12th. And so if folks have not had a chance to take a look at the maps, they are available online. They're out in the lobby here and at 9 of our library locations. Please do so. And once we have closed the public comment period, we will be bringing that item back to the board. And then finally, with regards to our shelters, the current census at the CARES campus of the available capacity of 604, we've been running about 570 to 585 on a daily basis. That's a slight improvement from my prior report a week or so ago. The women's census at that campus is declining because we've now implemented a policy to send the women to our place as a first option. If there's not space in our place, then we can accommodate them at the CARES campus. And there will be a CHAB meeting, the Community Homeless Advisory Board meeting here on November 1st in the county chambers. The SAFE camp, interestingly, is at full capacity, 44. We have had 7 successful placements into housing. We have another 15 individuals who are ready to go to housing. We just have not been able to locate a place for them to go. So those are, and then we have ordered Mod Pods, so a more permanent structure to replace the tents that we've been using this summer. We feel this is a better option as we go into the winter months. They will arrive in the next few weeks and replace the existing tents going forward. And then no update on our place. It is also at capacity, but there are no new developments.
Great.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So I'm going to make one quick announcement. Unfortunately, for those of you that are watching via or have been watching via our charter channel, it is down this morning, and it's not live on TV. However, you can follow the meeting on our YouTube channel, which is still streaming. But the charter, it seems to be working. They have working on the issue, and that hopefully will be fixed relatively soon, and we'll now make that announcement when that is back up online for those individuals. We apologize for any inconvenience. With that, I will go to Vice Chairman first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'd like to first address, I was out of town for the meeting. I was only made apprised of it a couple of weeks before. I had in fact, the manager and I were both out of town. I tried calling Great Basin. They did not return my call. They are under the auspice of the Public Utilities Commission, not the County Commission. They are a public utility, no different than Sierra Pacific. I have questions. I have been I'll call it a ratepayer of Great Basin Water before the speaker, 34 plus years, nearly 35 years, when it started as Sky Ranch Utility. I will say on the record, I am concerned with the way that the utility has been maintained, but I am working with our staff and with TUMWA to understand when and where the meetings will be held with the PUC. So I am watching it. I apologize that I wasn't there, but I can only be in one place at one time. For Mr. Solero, who I see came into the room, and for you, Mr. Edwards, when will we see the rest of the language that deals with that locks up Wild Creek? Because I know we had talked about some ways to do this, and we had talked about deeding it over to Sparks and doing some other things. What I want to make sure of is that regardless of what happens, that when it comes back in, if I should say, it comes back into Washoe County's hands, that future commissions cannot remove it from a state of public use. So that I want to ensure that, and I'm not sure whether the language is strong enough or effective enough to deal with that. Then and this is really sort of a serendipitous thing. We had to get our dog a rabies shot. We got contacted by Animal Services to provide a notice and documentation that the rabies shot had occurred. We got it with the SPCA just because it was difficult to get in with a regular vet. There's a disconnect, I was told by Animal Services, that they're not provided that documentation. So I'd like to see an agenda item come back from Animal Services as to how that's supposed to occur and why that information was not shared through the system. Apparently, there's a disconnect in the two pieces of software. I'm not exactly sure how it is supposed to update the system, but I'd like to find that out. Because I know I'm not the only one. I'm positive that this has happened time and time again. In fact, the person that I talked to at Animal Services told me that it happens even with vets all over town. Then, I don't know how many of you are getting scam phone calls. I got 6 of them yesterday to update my visa rates, change from one television provider to another or internet provider to another. Mr. Manager, can we work on a PSA that informs people that these companies do not reach out, and they're all Indian call centers. They do not reach out, and by the way, they're all unknown numbers when you see it come through. Sometimes it actually has a person's name on it. So I'm wondering, how do we deal with this? Because I know if I'm getting this many calls, so are they, and it preys on unsuspecting citizens who think that they can either change their TV or internet service or lower their interest rates on credit cards. And that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Vice Chairman. I've been informed that both Commissioner Hill and Commissioner Jung have nothing to add this morning, so I will move right on to my discussions. Mr. Manager, I would like, or staff, if we could get with Mrs. Doherty and get the specifics on the sites at Lakeside and Frost in regards to illegal dumping and address that. Also, would like to get a report from either the Sheriff's Office or HSA in regards to updates from the MOST team and what they have been doing in regards, in the Sheriff's Office in regards to homeless encampments outside of the downtown core into the unincorporated county that the Sheriff's Office have either been in company with or find out exactly where that sits with the MOST team. Another thing I'd like to announce, we last week on Friday, for those of you who have not seen that yet, Senator Kiekeffer, who represents Senate District 16, resigned his seat as a state senator, and effective at 5 p.m. on Thursday. He was appointed by the governor to the Gaming Commission to represent the state of Nevada, along with former second or judicial judge Judge Tagliotti from Las Vegas. Those were two appointments that he made to the Gaming Commission. But Senator Kieckeffer can no longer sit as a senator or a legislator as a gaming commissioner. And so his seat is now open. And we received a letter of that resignation from the governor's chief of staff Monday morning to hold an appointment process in conjunction with Carson City. Because Senator Kieckeffer in that Senate District 16 does represent both Washoe County and Carson City. That will be a appointment process by both of those boards to that seat for any remaining term for Senator Kieckeffer. So those processes will be outlined in further details after we meet with the state and the government and the legislature to identify a process and when that when that appointment process and application process will open. So for those of you out there looking for that, please be apprised of that as well. And with that, the other thing I do want to discuss at some point in time is economic development and the impact that it's having on our county and our community in regards to influx of product and how we are not seeing the supply chain issues change, and that we still are seeing challenges not with only our employers and our companies here, but also what can we be doing to help improve that employment process, staffing wise. So I'd like to have a discussion, Mr. Manager, hopefully, and I've talked to some business leaders throughout the community, but to have a better understanding of really exactly what some of those challenges are for that business community and how we could potentially help get some of the supply chain issues rectified or issues that pertain to employment and what we can be doing with that. And those are all the comments that I have for everybody this morning. Seeing nothing further from any of the commissioners, I will close item 4. And we will move on to item 5. This is our consent agenda. And I have been, so I'm going to ask, is there any commissioners out there that wishing to discuss any items or have any items in the consent agenda pulled this morning?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Alexis. I would like to have 5D1 pulled.
Okay, so we're, and Commissioner Hill, do you want that pulled for a separate discussion and a separate vote, or just for more clarification?
Well, it may need to be a separate discussion and vote, but I do have a clarifying question on it.
Okay, so we'll pull 5D1 for.
Thank you.
For a separate vote. We'll pull it out of consent and take it separately. So what I'll do is I'm going to open 5D1 right now, and we'll bring that out. So, Mr. Manager, can you please open 5D1?
5D1 is a recommendation to approve updated Washoe County Workforce Violence Policy, which outlines prohibited practices, training requirements, and the process to be followed when a workplace violence incident occurs. The policy complies with current legal requirements.
Okay. And Mr. Manager, this is coming out of the manager's office. Do we have somebody who can speak to this here this morning?
I believe Ben West is here.
Mr.
West.
West.
Has been in chambers.
I don't see him.
I think the DA actually has to address my question because I have been talking to Mr. West about this item. Sorry to interrupt, Mr.
That's
Chairman.
fine. Commissioner Hill, this is your item. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. I appreciate the opportunity to chat about this item. The policy, our original 2003 policy, was not posted with packet, so I actually had to ask for it from staff and didn't receive it until this morning. And so when I did receive it, I saw that the concealed weapons portion of that policy was stripped from the policy we were looking at today. Now, I understand that NRS prohibits the community from coming in to our building with concealed weapons. We have that posted, but I don't think it prohibits employees. And that's what I need to understand, because the 2003 policy had specific guidelines on how concealed weapons would be dealt with, that policy. And I'm worried that if we adopt today's policy, we are leaving ourselves open to any employee coming in with a concealed weapon without following some sort of requirement for, request and, looking into all of these different things that the 2003 policy outlined. So I guess I need clarification from the DA's office on what that would look like moving forward if we approve this policy and we're not looking at a concealed weapons policy until later this year.
Okay. Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, if you want to trail this item out, a couple items, Mr. Chair, I can take a look at that while that's happening and try to get an answer for Commissioner Hill's question here this morning.
Okay. Commissioner Hill, would you prefer that we take 5D1 and table that item for today's meeting and bring it back so that you have further time to address that with legal before taking the vote? Or would you want to just give it some time for Mr. Edwards to review, or would you want to take some time with that?
Mr. Chairman, I would prefer if we tabled it, because I'm worried that we may just want to bring both the concealed weapons policy and this workplace violence policy together. And so, I'd like to hear also information on that, and then have the original policy posted with it. So if you don't mind, this is a motion. I move to table item 5D1. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. And so with that discussion and based upon the recommendation from Commissioner Hill, giving some more allowance for time for her and our staff and manager's office staff to meet with the DA and Commissioner Hill, I'm going to table 5D1 for this morning. We'll take that off the agenda and bring that back after further review before we adopting that policy. So with that being said, with the removal of 5D1 from the consent agenda, are there any other items that any of the commissioners would like to remove or to have further discussion on this morning? All right, seeing none, I'm looking for a motion
So moved.
to accept the consent agenda with the removal of 5D1. I have a motion from the
Second,
Vice
Mr. Chairman.
I have a second from Commissioner Hill. Madam Clerk, is there any public comment on any of these items?
I have nobody signed in on any of these items.
All right, seeing no public comment on these items, we'll close public comment, bring it back to the board. And so I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right. Mr. Vice Chairman, do you have a block vote for us this morning?
Do, Mr. Chairman. So I would recommend that we put item 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, and 14, with the recommendation on item 7 that staff continues to work with the developer about potentially the HOA taking over maintenance of that trail.
Okay. So I have a motion for a block vote for items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, and 14, with a recommendation on item 7 for the HOA to take over continued maintenance of the trail for the trail easement.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to have staff come up and just make a brief comment about item 14, that this is a one-time expenditure. That's possible. I think Ms. Rodriguez is somewhere in the chamber, if that's okay. I'd like to leave it in block, but just make a...
All right, so I have a motion. Do I have a second for the block?
Yes, sir. This is Alexa, second.
All right, I have a motion and a second for the block vote. Ms. Rodriguez, if you could answer Vice Chairman's questions on item 14.
Yeah, Ms. Rodriguez, can you just explain that this is essentially a one-time expenditure, and it'll go through each, as it states, but go through each one of them, and this is just sort of an anomaly in this situation?
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioners. Am I on? I can't see the light. So we are in a slightly unique situation with the E911 Advisory Board. Due to COVID, there were some expenditures that we were not able to fund, and we have update to the 5-year master plan. However, we're on a timing crunch with some of our expenditures to make sure that we're able to fund those while we're still waiting for the update to the 5-year master plan. So based on conversations with you, Vice Chair, and Mr. Chair, we're recommending that some of these new expenditures be considered one-time funding options while we wait on those master plan updates to ensure that those would be something that would be considered to be funded by the E911 board going forward.
And Ms. Rodriguez, you are our Washoe County liaison to that board, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that board does make advisory recommendations to this board as a whole. So, all right, perfect. That's what I needed to know. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, so I have a motion and a second for items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, and 14. With the comments from the vice chair for item 7 to work with the HOA to continue maintenance on the trail easement. I have a second from Commissioner Hill. Mr. Manager, will you please read those into the record?
Certainly. So item 6 is a recommendation to approve resolution R21-061 to augment the Equipment Services Fund in the amount of $2 million to increase fiscal year 2022 budget authority to enable staff to place orders for replacement vehicles and equipment and direct the comptroller to make the necessary budget amendments. Item 7 is a recommendation to approve a trail easement and agreement between Washoe County and Hunt Harris Ranch LLC regarding an easement for a future trail through the Harris Ranch subdivision in Spanish Springs, affecting the parcels currently identified as assessors parcel numbers 538-272-01, 538-281-04, and 534-600-21, and approve a memorandum of understanding between Washoe County and Hunt Harris Ranch LLC, affirming that the aforementioned trail easement and agreement satisfies conditions of approval 7B and 7C for tentative subdivision map TM 16-007, approved by the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners on October 25th, 2016. Item number 8 is a recommendation to accept the Nevada Department of Public Safety Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security Lemon Valley Home Acquisitions Phase 1 grant in the amount of $1,034,981.25 with a Washoe County cash in-kind match in the amount of $344,993.75 for the purpose of purchasing certain residential properties located in the Lemon Valley area of Washoe County, removing all existing structures, buildings, materials, and debris, thereby returning the parcels to vacant open space that are further deed restricted to prevent any future development. Approve the sub-recipient grant award agreement with a grant period retroactive from August 7th, 2020 through August 6th, 2023, and authorize the chair to execute the same, direct the comptroller's office to make the necessary budget amendments, and designate the county manager as the authorized representative with the authority to enter into and execute all necessary construction and purchase agreements for the properties identified as APN 086-303-22 in a purchase amount not to exceed $227,000, APN 086-305-01 in a purchase amount not to exceed $132,500, APN 080-301-08 in a purchase amount not to exceed $354,000, APN 086-523-07 in a purchase amount not to exceed $228,000, and APN 086-523-01 in a purchase amount not to exceed $145,000. Item 9 is a recommendation to approve an agreement for professional services between Washoe County and Karma Box Project to manage and operate the River Stewards Project to improve water quality by reducing the amount of pollution in the urban Truckee River corridor through river cleanups, outreach, education, data collection, and maintenance, cleaning of Portland Loo bathroom facilities not to exceed $189,134. Authorize the purchase and contracts manager execute the agreement. Item 10 is a recommendation to approve an agreement for professional services between Washoe County and the and the Housing Authority of the City of Reno to provide payment processing services and administer pass-through direct financial assistance funds in the amount of $1,525,000 for professional services, $1,500,000 in pass-through funds for direct financial assistance, up to $25,000 in billable administrative costs from Washoe County's Emergency Rental Assistance 2 allocation from the United States Department of Treasury, starting September 23rd, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. Authorize the purchasing and contracts manager to execute the agreement. Item supports Washoe County residents facing possible eviction and/or experiencing housing instability through the COVID-19 pandemic. Item number 13 is a recommendation to approve reducing the hours of court referee position number 700-11177 from a benefited 30-hour per week part-time position to a non-benefited 19-hour per week part-time position pursuant to NRS 4.355 to create a special salary adjustment for seated justices of the peace during any time that the court is operating with fewer than the full complement of judges authorized by NRS 4.0201B, and authorize human resources to make the necessary changes. Total net fiscal impact of both requests is estimated at between $136,129 to $331,441 in salary savings. Item number 14 is a recommendation to approve the reimbursement of costs incurred by the City of Reno, the City of Sparks, Truckee Meadows Fire and Rescue, and departments of Washoe County for expenses related to and supporting of the enhanced 911 emergency response system and portable event recording devices as recommended by the 911 Emergency Response Advisory Committee on September 23rd, 2021, in an amount not to exceed $1,606,796.48 as specified, excuse me, within the adopted enhanced 911 funds operating budget.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manager. I appreciate you that. We're experiencing some technical difficulty right now with our system, and so to make sure that we are able to keep accurate records, I'm going to take a brief recess, about a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 11:20 and allow our technical services team time to do that. So until then, we are in recess. Thank you very much. right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask everybody if we can grab a seat. It looks like we're back up and ready to roll here. Madam Clerk, you're good?
We are good.
All right. TS staff, are we good in the back? All right. All right. All right, I'm going to call us back from recess. We're back in, and we recessed in the conclusion of the manager's reading of the block vote that was motioned by Vice Chair Hartung, second by Commissioner Hill. And I want to just make sure too, before we move forward, Commissioner Hill and Commissioner Jung, do we still have you on the phones?
Yes, still here.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just to verify our quorum, and we will move forward with that. Madam Clerk, was there any public comment signed in on any of those items submitted for block?
Looking through, there is nobody signed in on any of the block items.
All right, seeing no block, so public comment on the block items. I'll close the public comment, bring it back to the board. Call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with 4 commissioners voting and Commissioner Herman being absent. Please affirm your votes on the screen. All right, with that, all right, Mr. Manager, that takes us to item 11, sir.
Item 11 is a discussion and possible approval of a resolution to establish a list of fees to be charged to cover the actual cost of providing copies of public records in accordance with Washoe County's public records policy and NRS Chapter 239, including but not limited to NRS 239.052. Among other things, the proposed resolution defines actual costs to include personnel costs for staff time that exceeds 2 hours in filling any particular request, as well as provides a limited ability for department heads to waive all or a portion of fees in extraordinary circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And this was a request brought forward to the commission from the district attorney's office for some challenges and some issues. Well, I shouldn't say challenges and issues. I should say just some situations that have occurred in recent years, and to bring us into accordance with NRS 239 and also many of the other districts within Washoe County. So with that, Mr. Edwards, will you please take us into this and kind of give us a brief understanding of what we're considering today?
Sure. So in 2019, the legislature abandoned what was known as the extraordinary use standard for charging for public records compilations in response to a public records request. They replaced that with new provisions that now tie the entire system to an actual cost measure instead of an extraordinary cost measure. And so what has happened in the meantime is this county commission adopted an updated public records policy last summer that allows the department heads to charge actual costs. That policy was adopted in July of 2020. This piece is the implementation piece that sets the actual fee schedule. So this is an adjunct to the policy that was adopted by this board back in July of 2020. The reason for the fee schedule itself is that the statute requires that you post a list of the fees that you do charge, that you post in the departments where they can find that list. And so this is the list that needs to be adopted by this board in order to effect the actual collection of fees in response to public records requests. Getting a little bit more into the meat of it, this is built around the concept that personnel costs can be included in the concept of actual cost. The statute itself does not say one way or the other if you can or cannot charge for personnel costs. Those terms are not in the statute. It does say, and I'm paraphrasing, that you can't charge for basically overhead items, things you would have expenses you would have incurred regardless of the request, leaving open the door to charge for things that you incur not regardless of the request, but because of the request. So some thought was given to how that line of demarcation might be drawn in terms of staff time, because there has been what I would regard as a trend in requests that are designed or appear to be designed to simply bog down and overburden different county departments and related county entities and things like that, and their staff and their resources by asking for requests that are inordinate and massive in volume and would take many hours to complete by staff time. And it becomes a question of what resources are left to these departments and these agencies to carry out, mission-specific items versus respond to public records requests. That's what you'll be deciding today as the Board of County Commissioners, from a policy standpoint. From the legal side of it, the line of demarcation was arrived at by using the County Commission's own 2-hour staff time rule that has been in effect for a long time with this board. And for the audience, mostly, because I know you all know this rule, but for the audience, the rule is that if a county commissioner has a project or a task that they want a staff member or a department to undertake for them, and it's going to take more than 2 hours for them to do, they can't just, for example, send an email to that department head and say, hey, I want your people to run this down for me. Instead, that has to be put on an agenda and brought in here before the entire board and voted on, because that's considered a request and a project that is outside the scope of the typical duties of that department and for those employees. So that standard's been around for a long time. It was not crafted around the public records statutes or policies, but it does shed some light on what the county commission regards and has regarded for a long time as the cutoff between typical tasks and tasks that are beyond the scope of what employees are expected to do in carrying out their typical assignments. And 2 hours has been that cutoff line for a long time in the county. That was decided upon to be the line of demarcation for purposes of the proposed public records fee schedule that's before you today. The way it would work is that if someone comes in, does a request, it appears to be voluminous, the manager or department head in the department that receives the request will do an assessment, give an estimate of how much time it's going to take to fulfill that request. If it's under 2 hours to do, and frankly, that's a pretty substantial amount of time for a lot of these requests. In fact, I think the vast majority of them are filled in under that 2-hour cutoff. If it's going to be beyond the 2-hour cutoff, then an estimate is made as to how many hours are going to be needed. When that estimate is done and they decide who it is that's going to fill the request, that employee's hourly rate will be the charge under the fee schedule for anything beyond the 2 hours. There is also proposed policy that allows waivers in appropriate circumstances. That actually is tied to the statute itself, which does allow government entities to waive public records fee charges in appropriate cases. We put a little bit of substance on that framework in the proposed policy. We did it as a factor test rather than a rigid sort of bright line, black and white type approach. And the factor test that we came up with was educational, charitable, or journalistic purposes, plus the extent that they're working with the county to reduce or narrow their request if it's a voluminous one, and those types of things. So those are the factors that go into those decisions for the department heads. It's a judgment call. Waivers are never required, but it is something that can be granted in appropriate cases. And the statute does not require waivers either. It simply says that they can be allowed. On to the issue of whether or not personnel charges can be imposed. The 2019 amendments to the statute are actually, it's actually pretty interesting, because at first blush you look at it and you see that they remove the extraordinary use standard. and it looks like they were sort of cutting away from the ability to charge for personnel time. But when you actually factor in the entire picture, it's actually the opposite of what they were doing. Before, you could only charge for extraordinary use. Now you can charge for actual cost when it comes to this personnel issue. There were proponents of a subsection in the statute in the 2019 amendments that asked for the legislature specifically to include a subsection that prohibited charging personnel costs for public record request fees. That was in the first version of the statute. If you look at the legislative history on that, it was in the first version when it came in that personnel costs were specifically to be disallowed. The legislature said no. They took that subsection out. And that was a pretty clear signal that they thought in appropriate circumstances that might be something that government entities, local governments needed to do in order to manage their resources and their personnel and their time and all those kinds of things, their missions and whatnot. There's some additional comments about that in the legislative committee minutes that are consistent with what I just said about the ability to charge. They describe onerous requests and highlight those as examples. We have seen some of those onerous requests here locally come in, and the question then simply becomes, what is the line? What is the line? You know, where does it go from regardless of to because of, using the new statutory language? And that's what I've already discussed about the 2-hour rule. So that's the framework that's before you this morning. The cost is the actual rates of those employees. You know, I do think on a functional level, on a functional note, from our side, you know, over at the DA's office, I can say, I think we work quite a bit with requesters to try and narrow things down, get things, you know, dealt with, get people records, do our reviews, all those kinds of things. There are some of those situations, though, where there are people that just refuse to, you know, deal with that type of stuff, and they want, you know, mountains of records that, frankly, no ordinary person could even process all of the, you know, the records that are being requested with some of these. And so this is the type of situation where this idea emanated from. We do believe that it tracks with the changes in the law in the 2019 legislative session. As I said at the beginning, it is the implementation piece of the policy that you've already adopted for the county in terms of charging actual costs and setting that schedule for the department heads rather than have each individual department head come up with their own vision of how this might work, and you have a bunch of inconsistencies across the county. This was, the idea was that this would be better to do as a sort of uniform approach. The health district has already, the Washoe County Health District has already adopted essentially the same fee schedule that you're adopting or proposed to adopt today. The Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District has also adopted essentially the same fee schedule. There are other entities that do charge for fees. There are different approaches to this because this is new. So we're at 2019 to 2021, and we have the pandemic in the middle of that. So there hasn't been a lot of mileage on these provisions, you know, in the courts or otherwise, just in the arena of public opinion and public process. But we're still at kind of the beginning side of this type of thing. And so we gave it our best shot in terms of what we thought comported with the law and also addressed, you know, some of the concerns that were coming up. So that's what the proposed fee schedule is for you this morning. I also have with me today, and she's here in the audience, is Lindsay Liddell, who is one of our deputy DAs in our office. She is a fantastic attorney and is the public records liaison in our district attorney's office. And so she's our sort of in-house subject matter expert on these issues. And she has much of this at her fingertips, more probably than I do. And she is here in the audience and able to answer any questions that you might have as we go forward today.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Do appreciate that. I do have some questions from the commission. We will start with that first. So Vice Chairman Hartung.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Edwards, I want to make sure that we're not, and Ms. Liddell, thank you so much for coming up, that we're not a solution looking for a problem. That's always the issue in government. But how often would you say that in the past this new rule would have been triggered? And you can just do it as a percentage. Is it 5% of the time? Is it 40% of the time? Is it 2% of the time? Just give me an estimate.
Lindsay Liddell for the record. I would say it's probably about 10% of the time or less. It's
Okay.
really a minority, a few individuals, and like Mr. Edwards mentioned, it's the type of requests that are asking for any email that an employee has sent or received for his entire career.
Oh my goodness.
It's the broad requests that the requesters refuse to narrow, or the broad requests that demand physical copies, and then the requesters refuse to pick up those physical copies. So really what we're presenting to you today is an opportunity to recoup those costs incurred in those situations while maintaining and promoting access to records.
Okay. Is 2 hours a reasonable amount of time, or should we potentially look at a different period of time, maybe 4 hours or something of that nature? Would that be somewhat of a compromise that the DA's office would be interested in?
We're absolutely open to any amount of hour cutoff that the commission considers a point at which an employee's time is no longer just normal operating time, but is directly incurred as a result of the public records request. And like Mr. Edwards mentioned, we pulled that 2-hour mark from a policy that applies to the county commissioners themselves. And our thinking was that that's something that we already consider a cutoff, at which point a staff member is no longer conducting normal operations in their public works and instead is working for a commissioner or in other cases, a public records request.
And I will note that this is not an unusual scenario for cost recovery. At the Truckee River Flood Management Authority, we have to pay the Army Corps of Engineers hundreds of thousands of dollars just to review our permits. And we're all taxpayers, for crying out loud. So I know it can be frustrating, but what I want to make sure of is if we institute something that, one, it's not abused by our staff, by the county, and two, that it is equitable and it only is a scenario of cost recovery, where we're not in the business of trying to make money on FOIA requests. So those are my comments for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Ms. Liddell, I have a question for you in regards to the fee schedule. As I read the proposed policy, now will each department be in control of their own fee schedule, or will it be a set fee schedule across the county?
So the proposed resolution establishes a set fee schedule across the county. The public records policy that the board adopted last summer essentially would allow each department at this point to establish their own records fees. But rather than having some level of inconsistency, we created one policy for the board to consider, so that way it's the same across the board.
Okay. And for clarification, the timeline for the 2-hour rule, which we have implemented here at the commission for quite some time, that is just specific to the work to fulfill the request. Not the request is not part of the 2 hours. It is just the work to fulfill the request that's been submitted, right? Correct?
I believe so. Can you clarify your question?
So if I were to submit to you, and it took time for you guys to identify how much the scope of the work would be, that 30 minutes or something like that does not fulfill part of that 2 hours. It's just purely the 2 hours, as long as it's the request itself falls within, underneath 2 hours, that would be granted. And that's a majority, as you pointed out to Vice Chairman, majority of those requests are 90% of those, correct?
Right, that's correct. That's our understanding of how it's supposed to be implemented. It's that time spent searching for records, reviewing records to ensure there's no confidential information, things like that. So it's just the work on the actual request.
Okay, fantastic. And then as the DA pointed out as well, there is the ability to waive fees, and that was in connection with educational, journalistic, and charitable purposes. Now, when we talk about educational, journalistic, and charitable purposes, who it would be the one to discern whether or not where that falls?
So it would be the records official, which is generally going to be the department head in each department. And we put that in there just because we understand it's important to the county to promote transparency in government and access to records. And so we wanted to add some more meat to that fee waiver.
Okay, great. Thank you for those questions. Commissioner Hill, I have you signed in next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to reiterate what the Vice Chairman had said about concerns on data. I don't know if I have enough data to approve this proposal today. I don't know if this is a big enough issue, and I need a little bit more backup on, revenue loss by, staff hours that have been tracked or costs to the county that we're actually losing from these public records requests. When I worked at the city of Reno, I had no problem fulfilling requests, even the bigger ones, and ones that I couldn't do in a timely manner. We asked for extensions, and it was just part of my job. And so that's a concern I have. I also have that concern on abuse and making sure that staff don't feel that people are retaliating against them, and then they may feel like defensive and wanting to retaliate against the customer, and equity concerns as well. I don't think the county should be making money off of these requests. I think this is what our job is. I want us to be transparent, and I want us to find information for people. So on these extreme cases, what one of my thoughts would be, and I think, the chairman brought up a really good point on, different fees for different departments. If there's if we must look at a fee, is there a way for us to look at just a nominal fee per hour that is charged regardless? And so I just need a bit more exploration on this item before I'm prepared to vote for it, and a little bit more work to understand the real concerns. And I'd like to see what other jurisdictions other than TM Fire or the Health District are doing, like the City of Reno, like the City of Sparks, and other counties. I'd love to see what Clark is doing on this in Southern Nevada. So those are my thoughts and where I stand right now. Thank you very much.
All right. Ms. Liddell, it is my understanding that Clark County does have a fee structure, do they not?
That's correct, they do.
Okay, and can you maybe briefly outline what that fee schedule is? Because I think there's some ability for each, obviously, municipality to impose whatever they feel is fit for them. So theirs is obviously catered to Clark County specific, but can you elaborate a little bit about what Clark County is doing?
I can. Clark County has a fee list that outlines fees for different types of records. And then citing specifically NRS 239.052, Clark County has what they refer to as a fee for a media file, and then puts a per day fee based on that media file. So I don't know if Clark County includes staff time in that rate. It doesn't specifically say staff time. I can also tell you that I reviewed or searched for different entities' fee schedules. I saw on Carson City's website that they indicate they do charge for personnel time in certain circumstances, but didn't have online a list of what that looks like.
Okay. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Liddell, do you know, because I know the open meeting law does not apply to the legislature.
That is correct.
They've exempted themselves. Did they exempt themselves from this as well?
I don't believe so. It's my understanding that public records applies across the board, but
Okay.
Having not worked for the legislature, I'm not intimately familiar with that.
Okay, I'm just, wondering if that's the case. It's not an accusation, it's just a question. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I can see every side of this. And since we didn't get a side-by-side, I happen to agree with the Vice Chairman and Commissioner Hill's reticence of implementing anything at this time if we don't have definitive answers of, like, why doesn't somebody just go try to pull a record request from the legislature? You know what I'm saying? I just don't feel like I have enough data at this point. I know exactly what these laws are created for and why there are brakes put on it. I do want to say, too, this law would not apply to something like, where are the GID records? That, by law, we should have, as Ms. Roberts was concerned about. This is, as an example was used, 350 emails over the career of an employee takes so much staff time. We cannot artificially intelligently take care of this because they have to go through and redact anything that is confidential. So my inclination, just talking and hearing all of your concerns, I think the DA requesting this, I understand why they need it and want it. But I also wonder if this isn't ripe, too, because maybe this is something that we put in the clerk's purview. That way there's no department, this department costs this much, this department costs this, because ultimately she's the keeper of the records. So therefore, or he, whomever the clerk is, that position, shouldn't they be the arbiter and a gate that then people don't get different results based on different areas they go to? Because that seems more confusing. So I'm just wondering where this would be housed. I don't love, and I can tell you, I do love conformance with other entities vis-a-vis what we've already approved through the Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District, but I also understand we hold way more records than a fire protection district, so, and even really than a health district too. So I'm not saying I'm against it. What I am saying is we probably need to do some more work on this. Most importantly for me is the lack of data, because nobody's owned it, and the fact that it needs to be owned by somebody somewhere. And maybe if it was streamlined in that way, these journalistic and transparent and important, data is everything. Data is worth money. It's a commodity, the biggest commodity anybody has right now. So it seems to me that this needs a gatekeeper or a house in such a large county, and I don't even know if that's the best practice, but the fact that we don't even know for sure how Clark County works makes me a little nervous, considering there are most applicable, even more so than a city, I would argue, considering how deep and wide we go into providing a quality of life here that is basic, fundamental services. So, Mr. Chairman, that's just one commissioner's suggestion that this maybe needs to come back. But that's just me. Call for the vote, and we'll see where it falls. But that's just the reticence I'm hearing, if I'm hearing it correctly. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner John. I do appreciate it. I have to agree with the commission in the sense that I understand that there are 10% of those requests that probably surmount 90% of the work that you're having to do, and there has to be some sort of accountability for individuals to understand there is a certain amount of challenge that comes with those types of requests. And I think a lot of those requests in today's day and age, and most recently the ones that I've seen, are used as a opportunity to be accusatory or attack, but not really for the benefit of, this is truly not educational, it's not for journalistic reasons, it's not for charitable purposes, it's not for the benefit, it is just purely as an offensive. And that is not the intent of the public records. Understandably, public records should be available for everybody so that they have access, and we are very transparent about it. And it sounds like to me that there is consensus around some accountability for those individuals. However, what I feel is, and I find is that the fee schedule and the enforcement is lacking. There's not enough clarity there yet. I think the 2 hours is a good starting point, but it needs probably a little bit more detail within it. And, you know, a specific, I'd like to see a specific, you know, I know it says actual costs and the framework that's listed in 239, but, you know, if we go and put on in a fee schedule, the cost of ink toner, the cost of paper, the cost of that, is that a fee schedule that can change? Who changes it? Does that come back? Does that have to come back to Commissioner Jung's? Does that live with the clerk's office? Because is she buying all the ink and toner for the paper for every department? I don't think so. That's purchasing and procurement, and that's through the manager's office. So there's some challenges there. So I'd like to see some of that, maybe a little bit more detailed of actual costs. So that's transparent to the individual. And then I think the 2-hour rule can be discretionary. And I think that gives way. Now, I would hope that out of our 24 or 2,600 employees, that those that are on the front line discussing these types of requests with the general public have the ability to be more willing to offer that assistance than be restrictive of that assistance. But I want to make sure that what we're doing is for your office specifically is beneficial, because the district attorney's office does have to deal with a number of issues, and to sit and redact emails for 300,000 emails for the life of an employee, I think that's beyond monotonous, and I think that's beyond abusive. So I think there's accountability. I think people should have to, if they're going to take those types of stances, they should have to do that. As the Vice Chair pointed out, there are fees that people have to pay. It just has to be a little bit more specific. So in my opinion, and how I would feel based upon the discussion here today, is that the commission is moving in the direction of this is something that we would like to entertain. However, we would need more data about specifics about municipalities around us, and more detail around the fee schedule itself, and possibly not just a 2-hour cutoff, but some detailed, specifically, you know, as Park County does, a day of media work. You know, what is media? And to the point of media, and Commissioner Jung did bring this up, is that our media is changing from body cam footage from the sheriff's office to a record from an email that TS has to pull from 2 years ago to a very apparent or ready available file that's in the recorder's office. Those are 3 different types of media that can be pulled very easily or very difficultly, but that 1-2 hour limit may not suffice for one or the other. So I think those are specifics that we do need to drill down on. And it sounds like the commission doesn't have enough data yet. So I'm of the thought that we move forward, but bring this back for further discussion with some of those caveats, and accept today's kind of kickoff point, but bring it back for further detail-oriented and some more data for the commission to look at. So with that, Vice Chairman, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one other question that has to be brought into this is, how adept is the employee at ferreting information? In other words, if you and I were to look for the same piece of information, you're far more adept than I am, and you could probably do it in far less than 2 hours, and it could probably take me days, maybe weeks, to find the same information, because you know where to look. So it's a variable that it somewhat concerns me, and we really do need to have more data. I totally agree with my colleagues about understanding what other municipalities are doing. I think Clark is a good place to start. And how have they addressed some of these challenges that we're having? The only thing new in the world is the history that you don't know. And so I'll wager that they've had these very conversations. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any other commission comments from the commission? Commissioner Hill or Commissioner Hart? Jung?
Just to reiterate, I still think we need a clearinghouse for this because, and I just came up with the clerk out of nowhere just because I know they hold the official records. But a clearinghouse or an office of transparency and civil justice, or however you want to call it, I think would make sure people had a one-stop shop and they were treated fairly and that they didn't have to go to different department heads, and that it's just a clearinghouse and somebody who's in charge, because my fear is it won't be applied evenly, and it becomes then a level of which, like to the vice chairman's point, who is savvy enough to figure out the path. So I really want to reiterate that. This needs to live somewhere, so somebody is responsible for it and doing this equally across the board, no matter whom it is who's asking for it, and that the path is very clear and consistent. And yes, I do need all the data that was asked about today and trial runs if necessary to see, like, how do they handle that and how can we be the best at it and better their processes. Since we're a little bit late to this, we do have best practices to look at, as well as the unintended consequences. So I just wanted to make sure. I need to know who's going to be in control. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung. All right, seeing no further comment from the commission and discussion at this time, I'm going to open public comment. So thank you, Ms. Liddell. Madam Clerk, will you please call public comment?
Certainly. First up, we have Holly Wellborn, followed by Janet Butcher.
Welcome, Ms. Wellborn.
Do I push? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Holly Wellborn. I am the Policy Director for the ACLU of Nevada. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with you, Chairman and members of the Commission. I'm here in opposition of Resolution R21063 for a variety of reasons. You should have received a letter from the Nevada Open Government Coalition. We are a proud member of that coalition, and we do encourage you to read it. Charging for personnel time expended to fulfill a records request is a clear violation of the Nevada Public Records Act. The plain language provides that a governmental entity may only charge requesters for actual costs. Those costs are defined as direct costs associated with fulfilling a request, and the term does not include costs that a government entity incurs regardless of whether or not a person requests a copy of a particular record. Personnel costs, that includes salaries, those are costs that you are going to pay out anyway. This proposes to charge additional fees to cover those costs that are already accounted for in your budgets. I appreciate the city manager's office and the DA's office for speaking with us. We had a long conversation about the legislative record and the legislative intent. So I just want to say a few things about that. I want to make clear that the ACLU of Nevada, Nevada Policy Research Institute, Nevada Press Association, and a variety of other members of the Nevada Government Coalition were the architects of SB 287 that passed in the 2019 legislative session. Never at any time was a concession made to provide for charging for actual costs. There were discussions about it, for personnel costs, but that is not included in the law and should not be interpreted in that manner. And from our perspective, it is a violation of the Nevada Public Records Act. But really, even if that isn't the case, the Nevada Supreme Court is very clear on how the NPRA is to be interpreted. The court says that the legislative intent is irrelevant when the plain language of the statute is clear. The legislature took the time to declare the purpose and intent of the public records law. The NPRA is here to foster democratic principles by providing members of the public with prompt access to records. And it must be applied, the statute must be applied liberally and any restrictions narrowly. The cost in this resolution would uneven the scales on who can access records. When I even look at the waiver provision that you have in this, it talks about educational purposes, which is great. That's what we do. That's why we access records. We want to educate the public. Perhaps we access records because we want to file lawsuits. Nevada Policy Research Institute, that's what, the press and the media does. But those records belong to the public. Those records belong to the people who put commissioners in their seats. There's going to be time and opportunity where the average citizen is curious about what emails an elected official has sent, and they have the right to access that information. So for these reasons, we do encourage you to not pass this, and we do plan on contacting other governmental entities with similar fee schedules to let them know that they have also violated the law.
Thank you, Ms. Welborn.
Janet Butcher, followed by Richard Carpel. Janet Butcher's up first.
Yep. Ms. Butcher, then Mr. Carpel. Welcome, Ms. Butcher.
Gee, I wish I could give my time to Holly. She did a great job. I won't be quite as elegant, but first of all, one size doesn't fit all. And we are not Clark County, and please don't make us like Clark County. To me, they're already being paid for their time. And how can you quantify somebody's ability to get something done? And I think one of the commissioners already brought that up. Because Sally Jane may have 10 years' experience, and she's making triple what poor Billy Bob's making. So Billy Bob may take less time or more time. He may take 3 days opposed to Sally Jane's 15 minutes. I just don't understand, with the exception of that we're trying to maybe perhaps do a suppression of getting requests. All requests are not going to be the same size. So I just hope that you consider not even looking at this. Time is already being paid. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Butcher.
Richard Carpel, followed by Wayne Gordon.
Welcome, Mr. Carpel.
Richard Carpel, Executive Director of Nevada Press Association, here to oppose the public records fee issue. One thing I want to point out is that in 2019, the legislature, Nevada legislature eliminated a clause that allowed additional fees charged for public records requests for extraordinary use. And the argument now is being made that because they eliminated the extraordinary use clause, that now the county can charge for extraordinary use. The one thing that the memo and Mr. Edwards, I think, did get correct was that staff time or overhead cannot be charged for public records requests, but they, for whatever reason, don't consider full-time employees overhead where they should be considered part of overhead, and that's a reason why they shouldn't be able to charge for that. I think overall, the problem with the memo and with the staff's recommendation are that they assume that fulfilling public records requests is a side job, an incidental responsibility, that fulfilling public records requests is something the government only has to do when time is left over after all the other important stuff it does gets done. But that is a wrong approach. The legislator passed a law saying that local government entities must provide, quote, members of the public with prompt access to the public records they request to, quote, foster democratic principles. Fostering democratic principles is important stuff. The legislature, I think, is telling you that it thinks providing prompt access to public records is an important role that you play, not a burden to be tolerated when you're not busy. The one other issue I want to bring up quickly is I want to agree with what Commissioner Jung said, which is that there's not a lot of information here. How many times do you get these burdensome requests? They say 10%, but we're not quite sure. What I will tell you is That comes up all the time in all of our public, when we deal with public records issue in the legislature and outside, is that there are claims made about burdensome request or a retaliatory request, but there's never, and there's always a worst-case scenario, never any data. And I think the idea of actually looking at this issue comprehensively and finding out a way that local governments can figure out how to pay for what the legislature has said that it is their responsibility to provide. I think that would be a really positive step, and it wouldn't help just Washoe. I think it would be an example for other counties and local governments as well.
Thank you, sir.
Wayne Gordon, followed by Cindy Martinez.
Welcome, Mr. Gordon.
Hi, my name is Wayne Gordon. I live in the city of Reno on the east side. What I've listened to or what I've heard so far, I wasn't planning on speaking to this, so I didn't study it in advance, but most of the stuff I've heard presented thus far is subjective and not objective, making it very hard to decide who's going to pay and what. My main concern, right, is that we have the ability to shine the light onto what the public is entitled to see in public records. And I'm afraid that may be not happen. And in the end, people will have two levels of government. One for the big contractors and developers that can afford to get all the information that they want, and one for the homeowner who just wants to add a room onto his house, as an example. And this is not correct, and it's not legal, I believe. We need to have a really good knowledge of what we're going to need to do and provide, but to charge people for information that's on the public record, and with the internet and computers being what they are, I'm not sure that anything shouldn't be available without having to print it out anymore. Most old records, many old records have been changed to computers and are available. And we get in charges will be made for stuff that isn't. Further, there was talk about a waiver, maybe if they want it. Who decides that? Another subjective thing. We need to have rules that can be followed, okay? And they need to provide for the ability for individual citizens, the people, to be able to get the information that they're looking for. And I heard about, it's too much trouble to go through emails. Well, how much trouble was it just for somebody to get whatever they got to be able to go through all of Fauci's emails? And I'm not going to remind you about what was discovered in those emails, but there was thousands of them, and it wasn't good what was discovered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Cindy Martinez.
Welcome, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you again. Good afternoon. And I wanted to reiterate, I appreciated what Holly said. I couldn't have said it any better. But I do want to say, I think the trouble I have with what I heard is, in having been a veteran of government service of over 25 years and having worked inside and pledged undying loyalty to the agency with which I worked, I saw a lot of slack time. I saw a lot of complaining. I saw a lot of maligning of repeat complainers that called into our office. And we had some people that were the chronic complainers. And what we did in response to that is that we developed an agency policy on how to address those complaints for that particular person. And to Commissioner Hartung's point about, is this a solution in search of a problem, I would have to agree with that. Because if you're developing a subjective fee structure, that in my view, and I can imagine a couple of the people that this might be targeted to who might be requesting documents, it's designed to discourage them for asking for information. And we could argue about whether their requests are legitimate or not, but I think that goes under the heading of government. When you hold a government position, you're responsible, I'll say we, because I still hold the fact that I was responsible for serving the public of the state of Nevada. And I cannot be any more opposed to the development, with all due respect to Commissioner Jung, on developing yet another office to manage a government function. I would call it the Director of Duplication in charge of the Office of Redundancy. Because, if government can do it, government breaks stuff and then government purports to fix it. And I'm just, as much as I love my country and the foundation on which it was built, I am deeply disturbed by all levels of government, especially in the last 2 years. Government has broken down. It is not serving the needs of the people. It's not responsive. They've forgotten for whom they work. And that needs to be revisited and reminded of to the members of government. And I think it also comes under the heading of overburdensome regulation. So I am opposed to passing this resolution. I've heard language from the commissioners that indicate that they think that there is additional information that needs to be discerned, more research that needs to be conducted. And so to approve it and then tell them to come back with that which they've asked for, I think is assigned to the Director of Duplication in charge of the Office of Redundancy.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez.
I have nobody else signed in.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment on this. Is there, for the commission, any further discussion or direction at this time based upon the discussion here today? Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the need. What I don't want to happen is because we got a request for 300,000 emails, for it to be a knee-jerk reaction. So you end up, changing a policy. I would like to see more data. I would like to understand better why this has come forward and how, even though I don't disagree, I don't want to be like other municipalities necessarily. I want to do it our way, so to speak. But I also know that sometimes they have come up with solutions that can address these kinds of issues, and it has already been tested. And so I'd like to understand. I'm not talking about any adoption. I'd like to understand better how this has been dealt with elsewhere.
Okay.
So at this time, I'm not ready to make a motion. I would say that we give staff some more time. Ask for the 2-hour rule.
Yeah.
Give them some more time to give us more information, more data. We have to be data-driven. We have to understand better when we start changing these kinds of policies. Otherwise, we're doomed to fail. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. I would agree, and some of the public comments brought up some interesting points for me too. Personnel costs do vary. Obviously, our pay rates and pay scales for each individual and ability, and those that are probably more functional and have that greater ability to process a request in a timely manner are going to operate at a much higher cost and than those that may not. So personnel costs become challenging when setting a rate scale or a fee schedule to do that based upon those types of, that kind of deference. And then the types of media. I have an issue with the types of media. I think that if it's, whether it's a record, a paper record, a video, that has to have digital blurring in regards to specifics or people that are not included. I think that has to be discussed. And I think digital media, obviously anything email or of computer format or basic digital format is going to have a different type of record time, recording. If it's a paper record, it has to be scanned and provided, if it's, historical, long, so there are challenges there. And not all of our paper records have been fully digitized. Most have, and we're working on that process, but not all has made it that far yet. And, the clerk's office, the recorder's office and the clerk's office, that they both have done a lot of work to get those records digitized, but there are still quite a few paper records. Even those contractual stuff that we sign on an ongoing basis, a lot of our contractual stuff is still paper record in a lot of different formats. So I'd like to see some more data on this as well. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes right now. I would, if there was a motion to be made, I would move that we have direct staff to go back and produce a little bit more data-driven discussions around the fee schedule, more discussions around, potentially whether personnel costs are applicable or not, and then different types of, and to Commissioner Jung's point, a true gatekeeper. Who would the process live with? Would it be the manager's office, the clerk's office? How would that work? Even if it did, so that would be the motion I would give, not a motion of approval, but a motion of to go back and bring back further data on those topics. So, Mr. Vice Chairman, I have you send in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want consistency. And why should one person get a waiver and not another person? And why does one group or one area get a waiver and not another? I mean, if we enact anything, it has to be consistent across the board.
Right, I think consistency, there are certain things that have to be consistent across the board, but I think there are other things that cannot be consistent in regards to departmental stuff, the types of media. Do you see what I'm saying? So
No,
I think
I do.
there's complexity in any type of resolution here. It can't be just one size fits all, but it can't be so dynamic that everybody gets to be discretionary. But for rules of such as waivers, I think you're right that that has to be across the board. Whereas though a fee schedule maybe for the clerk's office may be different than a fee schedule for animal services that may be different from HR or sheriff's department. So I think those fee schedules are different because of the type of data or the type of media that they're working with.
And to your point, if I may, Mr. Chairman, may I ask the clerk a question? Scalacini, do you guys still have information on fiche?
We do, but
Yeah.
we've digitized everything. We have a triple redundancy. If we need to find anything, we can find it.
Okay,
We
so-
also do not charge for records that go before the board,
Okay.
and
So-
we keep
so
track of every public records request that has been made. in our
Even the
department.
older stuff is no longer on microfilm or microfiche.
It is, we keep it, but it's been digitized.
But yeah, that's what I'm saying. You have
Mm-hmm.
it digitized. Okay, good. Yeah, because I know for a long time it was just a physical record that had to be stored somewhere.
And we even know how to look it up on microfiche.
Okay,
That's impressive.
go figure.
Mr. Chairman, if that was a motion, I will second it.
It was a motion. You want me to clarify for you, Commissioner Hill, unless you have, I was going to allow you or Commissioner Jung any further discussion.
It sounded great. It sounded like you moved to have staff move forward with the direction we gave during the meeting
Yes,
and come back with another stab at a staff report and fee schedule.
yes, that is exactly my motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the commission? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, thank you, Ms. Liddell and Mr. Edwards, so we do appreciate that. We are on to item 12. Mr. Manager.
Item 12 is a recommendation and possible action to approve a resolution to delegate decision-making authority regarding litigation to the chair and the Washoe County Board of County Commissioners and the Washoe County Manager pursuant to NRS 241.0357.
All right. Mr. Edwards and Mr. Large from the District Attorney's Office is here with us to take us through this action and this recommendation.
Mr. Chair, yes, this. Hello?
Now you are.
Am I on?
Yep.
Okay. This item is pursuant to a Nevada open meeting law provision that was enacted after what's known as the Hansen case in the Nevada Supreme Court, where the court threw out an appeal from the Ethics Commission of a district court decision that they did not like, on the grounds that the Ethics Commission had never voted on the filing the notice of appeal. So they didn't even reach the merits of the appeal, they just threw the appeal out. It was a surprise to much of the legal community that they went that route, but the reasoning behind the case was that the client for a decision such as that was the Ethics Commission and not capable of being carried out by the chair of the Ethics Commission, the executive director of the Ethics Commission, and the general counsel of the Ethics Commission, who were the three that got together and decided to file the notice of appeal in time for the deadline. So for people who don't know, if you miss a notice of appeal deadline in a case, that is a fatal defect. The case is thrown out. It's what they call subject matter jurisdiction, and it means that they have no power to act on the appeal at that point. So they had their case thrown out. So that kind of sent shockwaves through the legal community. And ultimately what happened is the legislature passed a statute that they added into the open meeting law, 241-0357, where they allowed the local governments to delegate litigation decision authority to the executive head of the governing body. In this case, it would be the county manager or the chair. And so the proposal before you today is for a delegation of authority on a variety of decisions in a litigation context. Mostly this comes up in relation to deadlines that are dynamic and frequently change throughout the course of the life of a case. There's also a provision in there for a settlement authority. I think it's up to $150,000. That's an increase of the settlement authority that already exists by delegation to county employees. Currently, under the Washoe County Code, the manager's office and the county manager is authorized to settle cases up to $25,000. This would be an increase of that from $25,000 to $150,000. In terms of all the pieces within the proposal, I would view that as the least critical. I think the more important provisions, from the standpoint of legal advice, the more important provisions in the proposal are the decisions that have to do with things like deadlines and those types of things. Mr. Mike Large is one of the attorneys in our office. He is the litigation lead in our office. He oversees the litigation that the county is involved in. That's usually quite a few cases going on at any given time. I'm just sort of guesstimating, but it's pretty common to have anywhere between 30 and 40 active lawsuits that the county is a party in at any given point in time. And so the need for something like this comes up fairly often. But Mr. Large is here for more specifics and more details and a more of a on-the-ground point of view about the way this comes into play and the importance of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Large.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Large from the Washoe County District Attorney's Office. The legislature passed 241-0357 in NRS 241-0357, as Mr. Edwards stated, in the 2019 legislative session in direct reaction to the Hansen decision. It allows the delegation to the chair and to or the executive director of the public body. This provision is necessary for litigation. The timelines that we deal with in litigation are often immovable. From 10-day timelines in regard to or 14-day deadlines for offers of judgment to 30-day deadlines. By the time I can get a staff report written and get it on a commission agenda and approved by this board, there's a failure to act. We can't move fast enough to get things on agenda in an open meeting context. What this does is it allows us to bypass that, and with the approval of the county manager and or the chair, we can then make those decisions that are critical, that are best there to protect the people of Washoe County in regard to our litigation. So we aren't at a disadvantage. For instance, the most operative is an offer of judgment is made, which is a fee shifting provision that we have 14 days by rule to accept. I can't get a staff report written and on your agenda to do that. If I don't accept an offer of judgment in that time period, they are then entitled to their attorney's fees and costs for everything that has occurred after that offer has been made. At that point, if the county is potentially liable, I am now imposing more costs and fees on Washoe County, and I never had the opportunity to come to you and say, hey, this needs to get accepted or rejected. We never had that opportunity to do that because I couldn't do it in the open meeting forum. Now, in regard to this provision generally, this resolution, this delegation of authority does not change the duties that the Washoe County District Attorney's Office has to the Board of County Commissioners. We still have a duty of care and confidentiality and loyalty. You're still going to be informed in attorney-client meetings in regard to ongoing litigation and offers that are made. You're going to be either via email or in a private meeting, you're going to be informed of everything that's occurring. What this bypasses is the need to put it on the agenda to have it done in an open meeting, and allows those quick decisions, those snap judgments that have to be made in an expeditious fashion. The resolution is written broad enough that it encompasses anything that could potentially come up in the litigation context based on Mr. Edwards and my experience representing you. And with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
All right. Commissioner Hill, I have you signed in first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question on, back to this issue on, have we failed to have these items on our agenda in time, and have we paid those attorney fees and not met our litigation obligations as Mr. Large has outlined? Has that happened, or is that a theoretical?
Commissioner Hill, this is Michael Large. Yes, we have not had a situation where that is purely theoretical at this point, but it is one of those things that has come up on a regular basis in regard to those offers being made. And usually I can get in here into a private meeting, or I can make the thing saying that we're going to reject it or just not respond. But that is potentially a worst case scenario. We haven't come to the point where we've missed a deadline in regard to a notice of appeal that's been filed, nor have we run up a situation where we've had a compulsory counterclaim, which is the other major issue in regard to initiating litigation that has to be approved by this board. But what this does is this prevents that from occurring in the future.
Thank you for that answer. I just have concerns with this. I'm not prepared to vote for this today, not because I don't believe that our chairman or a future chairperson couldn't help make these decisions, or that our county manager couldn't make this happen, but I really believe in government transparency. I believe this needs to be on open agendas. People need to know what kind of litigation that the county is settling if they want to. And so that's where I stand on this issue, and thank you for the information.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner John.
I want to clarify for my fellow commissioners and the listening public. We actually would need this to then come on the agenda, is my understanding. Should it be that we were ever paying anything? Is that correct, Mr. Large?
Can you clarify, Commissioner Jung? I'm sorry.
Wouldn't that have to be, so you go ahead and accept it? So the way I see this, in my mind, is this is another tool in the tool chest to be able to respond rapidly in the absence of being able to get in front of us. And it's also a strategy. And my question is, should you settle and the county pays for something, does that not come before the board and we on the public record with the names of the plaintiffs, and we approve it?
Generally speaking, at this point, under Washoe County Code, anything over 24-9 has to be put on the agenda and approved in an open meeting pursuant to entering into a settlement agreement. This would give that authority to the county manager to enter into that agreement, or to the chair. So it would bypass the need to do this in the open
Okay, so you're
meeting.
moving, so I mean, that's just inflation, 25,000 to 150,000, and that's the experience on the ground in the courts. Please let me finish. And what I'm trying to say is, when we go to the legislature, for example, we always appoint a legislative liaison, and we do it craftily and politically, and sometimes we send a different person because, listen, we are there to defend Washoe County and to get what we need. those snap judgments are made too, because of how fast the legislature goes. I don't see this as any way becoming less transparent. I think that anybody who sues us, isn't that a matter of public record?
Yes.
Okay. So I see this as a tool in your tool shed that probably, honestly, is never used except for what we consider low amount of money. And I've never heard of a $25,000 settlement. It's way over to the six figures, especially, and what they're claiming for. So I think this is housekeeping. It is in response to what happened in a particular case. It is theoretical, but it's just another tool in the toolbox. And here's one thing I want to reassure the voters. The county manager works for, each of us. We're 20% of his employees. So it would not be in his best or her future best interest to do anything that would create any sort of non-transparency to the public and for what that commissioner has purview to and can share with the public. So I'm ready to move on this today. I think that it is enabling, but it probably very rarely will be used, and let's see what happens. And we can ask for, just because the manager, also has purchasing power up to $200,000. Just because the manager can sign off on that does not mean that is not under the commissioner's purview or the public's purview. That's all a matter of public record. So I have no problem with this, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jung.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, in
Yes.
regard to one thing Commissioner Jung said, the reason the $150,000 is referenced in there is that reflects the tort cap that is now applicable to municipalities. And we thought, Mr. Edwards and I, in consultation, thought that reflected in regard to what the county manager and the chair are able to settle in regard to a low item amount. The 24.9 is really, it is, as Commissioner Jung, outdated. We don't have those cases that rarely, if ever, come before this board within those lower amounts.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you. As a compromise, is there any way we could put these on our agendas as informational items? Because the public doesn't know about settlements unless they're on the commission agenda. So it would be a way to be transparent, but also move quickly. Is there a way we can do that? I know that the legislature does that with their committees.
So I was going to jump to that very topic, Commissioner. And so this is what I would recommend after discussion with staff and knowing the little that I do about the legal field and listening and understanding and working with my wife and many attorneys, deadlines are what you live and die on. And the courts move at a very, very different pace. Whether you're in bankruptcy or appeals court or Supreme Court or second judicial, all which we find ourselves in here at the county very frequently. Those abilities to move flexibly and dynamically to hit deadlines is essential in the course of law. And I really, to me, it's more important to address the authority to hit those deadlines on behalf of the county instead of really even the settlement. I'm not even concerned with the settlement as much as I am the ability to move quickly on pleadings, filings, and those types of decisions versus sitting and I think Commissioner Hill, as Commissioner Jung pointed out, you and I operated in a fashion during session that we had to make, daily decisions on oppositions and support for legislative situations that we ultimately brought back to the board through legal descriptions. I think we can do the exact same in that fashion here with this, is that we grant the authority as drafted within the policy, but bring it back as a report or, as you pointed out, Commissioner Hill, a notification process of settlement of any litigation that has occurred. The other change I would make to the resolution is that it not be just the chair, but it would be the chair and the manager, not individual. That it would be both of us working concertatively together in concert to make sure that we are addressing, because operations side will come obviously from the manager. And as the elected chair, which is elected, I'd like to remind the public too, by this board as a whole, and is a process that this board goes through every 2 years, every 24 months to elect a chair and make sure that they have the confidence of the board to carry out those decisions. Not acting as one individual for a district, but acting as an individual chair for the entire commission and county as a whole. I would say that that should be changed to and the manager versus or the manager. I would want to see that in concert. And then, like I said, to me, it's ministerial in regards to the amount of the actual settlement process, but the litigation and the deadlines of filings is essential that we move forward with those. So that is my opinion, knowing what I know, and sometimes that's not enough. But knowing what I know, that is really, truly an issue that we should address. So those are my...
Mr. Chairman, if that was a motion, I second it.
All right, I would make that as a motion, and that we would move approval of the resolution with the changes of the, but I do have public comment, so I'm going to open public comment and do further discussion. So before we do that, Commissioner Hill, hold on. Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Commissioner Hill, if I heard her correctly, she was asking also for when these things are executed, once it's all said, once it's all done, that a list of those be made public on our agenda. Is that part of it? Because that's what I heard her say.
It would be a notification, yes.
A notification. Okay, that's what I'm sorry. I didn't get that part. I apologize. Thank you.
Yep. It would be a notification to this board in confirmation of any settlement made.
A public notification.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Manager.
I understand I'm not a commissioner, but the commissioner who is not here, Commissioner Herman, did ask that I relay her concern about this item as well. She didn't say that she would not support it, but that she had concerns about it, and
Understood.
she wanted that on the record.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. All right, I'm going to open public comment, and then we'll close. We'll come back for final discussion. Madam Clerk, will you please open public comment?
I have Cindy Martin signed in, and as she approaches the podium, I will note for the record that Tammy Holtstill and Susan Ambrose sent in emails that will be placed on the record.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Welcome, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Once again, I find this very disturbing. It's another solution in search of a problem. So one case gives rise to new legislation that's supposed to drive new policies. The problem I see not only I don't think it's necessary, my problem is I don't see any language in this resolution that addresses any mechanism that the chair and the county manager, who would they delegate that responsibility to if they themselves are the subject of litigation? Currently, a number of members of the county commission are being sued, which is not uncommon in government. But how can one who's being the subject of a lawsuit make a decision about a lawsuit in which they are being named? So I think that's a conflict of interest. There needs to be some clarification on how to put some transparency and objectivity in there. I don't think that it's necessary to create this policy when it hasn't happened, by Mr. Large's acknowledgement that it hasn't yet happened. You know, once again, it's government in search of a solution when the problem does not yet exist. And we, the people, end up bearing the burden of that through increased taxation, through glacial government movement, where the concerns of the citizenry are not being addressed. it's just such a disappointment to understand really that the government that we've supported for, in all of our years is bogged down in things problems that they've created. So let's see, the point about how many, so no blown deadlines have occurred yet. There was an incident back here a few months ago where this county commission was able to move pretty quickly in obtaining legal action against the duly elected county assessor, Michael Clark, over some, I guess we could dispute what the subject is, but there was no problem with getting to the courts to get a TPO in no time flat. So I guess if you've got the right levers to pull and the right avenues to drive down, you can get what you want. But if it's for the citizens, we're going to have to get in line. I do not support this resolution.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have nobody else signed in.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, so with that, with no further public comment, I would like to, further just the final discussion is basically we will move forward with approving the recommendation and agree with the resolution with the changes being made pursuant that both the manager and the chair would exercise any type of resolution or any type of decision, and that this really be a dynamic process for in our tool just to move forward. So I have a motion by myself, second from Commissioner Hill. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 3-1 with Commissioner Hartung being in the opposition. All right. That takes us, all right.
Can we take a bio break, Mr.
Yes, let's take a quick bio break. It's 12:45. We'll be back at 1 o'clock, and we'll move with our public hearings. afternoon of business we need to conduct. I'll let it hit 1 o'clock. Commissioner Jung and Commissioner Hill, are you still with us? Phew. Commissioner Hill, you there?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I am.
All right. Commissioner Jung, do I have you? Please, can you call Commissioner Jung, please? I feel like we've lost her. You might. It's par for the course. You just get too far in the weeds sometimes. All right. Are we? Three commissioners at this time. So we do have Commissioner Hill. Please let the record be show that. Commissioner Jung is not with us at this time. And we have Commissioner Hill, Vice Chairman, and myself present for the final. So with that, these are public hearings. I'm going to open the public hearing. Item 15, and with that, this is a resolution to convey, and with that, I'll open this up to Mr. Manager.
Item 15 is a public hearing to consider objections to resolution of intent to convey R2-056 and possible action to approve the purchase and sale between Washoe County and the Northern Nevada Youth Golf Foundation, DBA First Tee, for Northern Nevada, a corporation for public benefit under NRS Chapter number 82, for the transfer of the property commonly known as the Wild Creek Golf Course on Sullivan Lane in Sparks, Nevada, APN 027-011-09, approximately 110.72 acres, as authorized in NRS 244.284, and, if approved, First Tee will be required to operate the golf course for charitable or civic purposes for the community on terms specified in the purchase and sale agreement and related documents, and if the property ever ceases being so used, it will revert automatically to Washoe County. The balance of the funds associated with Wild Creek Cost Center 680-100 on the actual date of transfer to be utilized as a one-to-one match for fundraising efforts by First Tee for improvements necessary for reconfiguration of the golf course for their needs, and authorize the county manager to execute any and all required documents necessary for the property transfer.
All right. We have Assistant County Manager Dave Solero here with us to discuss any questions the commission may have in regards to this conveyance to First Tee. Are there any questions from the commission? Do you have any, Vice Chairman?
Yeah, it's not, it's not on this issue itself, it's the ultimate. And so if we look in the subject line of the staff report, you look down about 2/3 of the way, and it says if the property ever ceases being so used, it will revert automatically to Washoe County. I agree with that completely, but what I also want, Mr. Solero, is ultimate language that sets this property, regardless if it reverts back to Washoe County's hands, into perpetuity as open space or for public uses, not necessarily golf, but, public uses in some shape or form.
For the commissioner, through the chair, for the record, Dave Solero, Assistant County Manager. I think after you've heard the objections or others during this process, it might be easiest for the board to accomplish that by simply providing me direction to make sure that the purchase and sale agreement includes the language in the 8 bullets that are listed on page 4 of the staff report, because that entails all of the items that are currently being worked through between Washoe County, the Washoe County School District, City Sparks, First Tee, in association with this. Bullet number 1, 2, 3 talks about the restrictive covenant associated with the grant bargain and sale deed, which includes the language that I think you're looking for. And so by providing that to us as direction in the motion, I think that captures the concern by the
Okay, because as I read that, I didn't see that the reversion just reverts back to Washoe County's possession, not that it says that if it is reverted back into Washoe County's possession, that a future board or commission, cannot. What I don't want to see happen again is I don't want to see it become a school. I don't want to see it become, public housing. I don't want to see it become anything other than public open space.
And Commissioner, I'm sorry to, I think, the way I read it is that it's quoted here, in the event the title reverts to the grantor shall designate the property in perpetuity. So in my understanding, in perpetuity as a public park, open space area, and/or golf course for the benefit of general public. So I think that is covered in that language that will be in the resolution in perpetuity, that will allow for no future boards to truly take that kind of revision action on it unless it is brought in front of a public process, because we can't
You can't deed restrict it? I mean,
well, we
that's
can't limit further boards on action, but we can deed restrict property in the sense of when we grant sell. So I think this is a way that we can, without limiting future boards' abilities, try to focus on reverting it in perpetuity as open space and keep it as such.
Okay, can Mr. Edwards opine on that? I differ. I mean, I'm okay, but I differ a slight amount where, I don't want future boards to have the ability to change this. This is, imagine Central Park, where they decided, well, the city's grown to such an amount, and so now we need to, encroach in that area. So again, I just want to understand.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, so the clause that is identified in that bullet point on page 4 of the staff report, I think accomplishes as much as you can accomplish at this point in the process. So I think it carries out the intent that Commissioner Hartung is referencing. No matter what you do at this point, there will be an open question for the future, probably long in the future, about the effectiveness of binding future boards in perpetuity and those kinds of things. And I can't tell you how that's going to play out. There's some interesting angle to it in the sense that it's the grantor essentially granting the property and then restricting himself in the future. And can the grantor restrict himself on his own property? Usually what happens is if you grant it to somebody else, it can be restricted, in that context. You could potentially grant it, to the public at large, and that's kind of what the condition says in the bullet point on page 4. But you won't close the door on that issue. There's no way to really do that, but I do think that this gets you as close as you're going to get on that.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Edwards, let me understand. If we were to have given it to the city of Sparks, then we could have deed restricted it? Would that have accomplished that?
Yeah, if you grant it to the city of Sparks, you can grant it to them to be held in open space in perpetuity, for example. You could grant it to another entity and carve out that stick from the bundle of sticks, as they say in property law, when you give it to them.
If if the city of Sparks would be in agreement with that, will agreeing to this today, and I do want to get this done, there's no question of that. I think that this is a great forward motion. I have no issue with the operator. I think he's proven himself time and time again, or they have proven themselves time and time again. Would it be possible to, obviously with the city of Sparks approval, because I know that they're desirous of this same scenario, at least the current city council is the current mayor.
If you wanted to do that, you could, if I could make a suggestion, if there was an appetite to move it forward today, you could approve it. In the future, if you wanted to, you could do another item where you grant away the county's reversionary interest to the city of Sparks or something like that and carve that out in that context. Legally speaking, I would say, you're giving up, property rights that the county has. If you do something like that, I think that's a policy call for the board to make. Just be aware that's what you're doing. At this point, it's reversionary, and when it comes back, that question's open, but I think it may be more academic than anything else. So you could potentially do another piece to this if you wanted to really close that door. Like I said, I do think that this gets you as close as you can get without making it more mechanical than it already is. So
Okay. A gimme in golf terms?
a gimme, it's, yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Okay, thank you.
And Vice Chairman, and I understand your concern and want to move forward and preserve this in perpetuity. And I think this commission feels the same way you do. However, we are bound that we've taken an oath that we will serve at the pleasure of the community and our district and at the county for as long as we're in those seats. But those needs may change and costs may change and different things like that. So to promise that it's challenging. And and it was the same thing for RSCVA. And not to open a bad wound, but RSCVA, when we took on Wild Creek before Washoe County took it back over, those challenges did not exist in 1970 when we initially took it on. That exists today. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that we're not trying to bind future boards. We're just trying to preserve what we can today with the understanding that as long as it's in, and to give the property to Sparks doesn't mean that Sparks's board won't change, and that they, as even if we deed restrict it, could find ways to change that ownership and make those changes themselves. So there are ways to work around, so I want to make sure that as long as Washoe County maintains that ownership and it reverts back to Washoe County, we will, as long as we possibly can, continue to preserve that for the community. You see what I'm saying?
I do, Mr. Chairman, but not to be Machiavellian, but I do want to bind future boards. I want to make sure that stays as a, I'm sorry, I do. It's
Don't you wish we could do that all the time?
It's a gem in our community, and as our community continues to grow, those kinds of gems will be fewer and farther between. Imagine selling
Agreed.
off pieces of Rancho San Rafael, which we can't because the original donor restricted it, and so.
Agreed.
And we have had, by the way, numerous extremely good offers to buy. I'll list specifically the corner of Virginia and McCarran, where Rancho San Rafael is. I mean, they've come in and offered big money, but obviously that is not in the public's interest. So that's my intent. I'm not going to be obstructionist in any way, shape, or form. Again, I think that what we're doing today is wonderful, and I'm fully behind this operator. I just want to make sure that it just never goes away.
I think you've done a phenomenal amount of work, and you and Mayor Lawson have represented your community very justly in this process. I think the intent and what's coming out of this is going to be beneficial not only for the county, but for First Tee and their operations, their ability to teach children of the community golf. I think the youth and the general public having access to a golf course that at one time was not highly functional and now will be. So I think that through all of that, we're accomplishing that here today. So with that, Mr. Vice Chair, if you have is there any public comment before we go any further? Madam Clerk.
There's nobody signed in.
All right, seeing no public comment on this item. Mr. Vice Chairman, if you'd like to move forward with the motion.
Does Commissioner Jung or Commissioner Hill have?
I have not, I have gotten no comment from either, but Commissioner Jung and Commissioner Hill have both messaged me and said no, they have no comments.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Edwards, do I need to read this entire motion, or can I just make the motion as outlined in the staff report on page 5?
Yeah, the latter. I believe that you can simply say you're making the motion outlined in the staff report.
Okay.
all right, I will second your motion. All right, seeing no further public comment, please let the record show that Commissioner Jung is back on the phone and online. She is available. And so with that, we have a motion and a second. We've taken public comment on the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously with all 4 commissioners voting. And thank you very much, Mr. Slur, I appreciate that. And Mr. Mazzaferri, good luck. Good luck, everybody. Appreciate it. All right, we are on to, this is a introduction and first reading for item 16. And with that, Madam Clerk, will you take us into the introduction?
Of course. This is Bill number 1863, an ordinance amending Washoe County Code, Chapter 2, by adopting supplement number 15 to the Washoe County Code and all clerical and technical corrections made therein. The supplement codifies ordinances amending the Washoe County Code that were adopted between February 2016 and June 2020 and includes ordinance numbers 1575, 1576, 1579, 1580, 1581, 1585, 1588, 1589, 1590, 1593, 1599, 1600, 1601, 1602, 1609, 1610, 1611, 1612, 1614, 1616, 1617, 1622, 1628, 1629, 1643, and 1650. This supplement does not include ordinances amending the Washoe County Development Code, Chapter 110, which is published separately from the county code.
All right, so we have that the ordinance has been read in. This is what bill number?
Bill number 1863.
Bill number 1863. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, is there any public comment on, signed in on this item?
There is not.
All right, seeing no public comment, I'm looking for an introduction for Bill 1863. Mr. Vice Chair.
I move to introduce Bill number 1863 as outlined in the staff report with the second reading to be held on October 26, 2021.
Thank you. So we have a bill that's been introduced, and
We had no public comment?
we took public comment. There was no public comment.
Awesome.
All right, thank you very much. We will close that item, so that is that. And now, Mr. Manager, we are on item 17.
Item 17 is public comment. Comment heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the commission agenda. The commission will also hear public comment during individual action items with comment limited to 3 minutes per person. Comments to be made to the commission as a whole.
All right, Madam Clerk, will you please call public comment?
First up, we have Janet Butcher, followed by Cindy Martinez.
Welcome, Ms. Butcher.
We all know the medical staff has been reduced in our area, and it will be more reduced in the near future due to the tyrannical position for forced experimental injections. Now, these essential workers are being fired. Does it make a lot of sense? Nice way to show appreciation for all their hard work last year. I just completed a vacation in America, and, well, it is still thriving in the Midwest. Thank goodness I was driving and wasn't subject to the airline cancellations these past few days. 80% of airline pilots are ex-military. They see the tyranny that is happening. They are using all their banked vacation and personal time up so they don't lose it before being fired. And I can tell you that this information was obtained from a pilot. There is an easy solution to the supply chain debacle. We can stop with the ridiculous injection forcing. Pfizer received the largest criminal fine in history. Part of this settlement claim was due to paid kickbacks to healthcare providers to entice them to prescribe drugs. So who is profiting now? Moderna stock on September 28th, 2020 was $70.01. September 28th, 2021, the Moderna stock was $431. Moderna is the #1 pharma stock held by members of Congress. I wonder what other elected officials are holding stock.
Thank you, Ms. Butcher.
Cindy Martinez.
All right, closing the end of a very long day. Thank you for your time and attention. We citizens would much prefer to be at home pursuing enjoyable things instead of being the watchdogs for those of our citizens who are not able to be here, which is why I'm here and why the folks that have come with us. And this is generally for, not necessarily for the county commission, but this is an opportunity to let Washoe County become aware of a change of leadership in the Washoe County Republican Party. Yesterday morning, the executive committee summarily resigned and handed us the keys to the office and left. They left it, and we kind of expected that. The problem that we had before with the previous leadership is that they employed an authoritarian leadership style, and they didn't want to have any input from we the people. We asked for a seat at the table. We wanted our opinions and our ideas about governance to be heard, and people that we wanted to run for office, and that was not heard. And so our successful recruiting efforts at getting conservative members of the citizenry are reflected in the fact that the executive committee resigned. What this means for the citizens of Washoe County, and I would be speaking not only to our fellow Republicans, but those disaffected conservatives, independents, libertarians, who have found themselves left out of the political process and are now registered as independents or nonpartisans, some of whom have been spoken with and actually are conservatives at heart, is that there's an opportunity to drive the narrative back to a return to constitutional governance, which is what we've been talking about. So what happened on July 22nd was that we had successfully passed bylaw amendments for monthly meetings, which previously it took two meeting cycles to be voted into the central committee. The previous leadership really tried to stifle participation in the local party by doing that. So now what we've done is we've been able to speed up the process of interested citizens to become members of the central committee and participate in self-governance. Additionally, our proposed bylaw amendments that we passed on September 28th incorporated sunsetting language from NRS 293 regarding self-governance or governance of state parties. So what that means is that the power in Washoe County has been returned to we the people, and this can only be a good thing for the citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have nobody else signed in.
All right, seeing no further public comment, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. We're on to final commissions and county managers' announcements. Mr. Manager, do you have anything final?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Commissioner Jung or Commissioner Hill, do you have any final comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vice Chair.
Commissioner Jung, go ahead. No. Did I lose him? Commissioner Jung?
Hi.
Yep. Are you good? Do you have anything final?
I just wanted to say thank you to you and the vice chairman. Thanks for holding the fort down.
Thank you, Commissioner John. Commissioner Hill?
No comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Vice Chairman? Nothing? Seeing nothing, we are adjourned. Thanks very much, ladies and gentlemen.